What's shaking booktube? My name's Cam and welcome back to another video. Now it's no secret that I've done a lot of shit talking on my channel before about writing cliches. Yeah, I know. But today I'm actually going to be spreading some positivity. I'm just going to be giving some opinions and I don't really expect any pushback on any of these opinions, even if people disagree, to be honest. Because hand to God, like 9 out of 10 people on booktube, including myself, I'm sure I've done it in the past, when they say they're going to drop a controversial opinion, it ends up being like, no one really gives a shit. Oh yeah, time to light booktube on fire with this one. Huh, look at that. Someone said, I respectfully disagree. Triggered much? Are you following me on Instagram yet? If not, suck a d***. But you should be, you're missing out on content like this. So first I want to clarify, and it's something I've been confused about in the past, but it is something I've made a video on, I'll leave a card, but that's that tropes aren't a bad thing. Tropes aren't inherently cliches. Tropes are almost, although not specifically, just subgenres. They are defining features of what puts something into a genre. A horror movie with a slow-moving masked slasher, that's a trope. Although you wouldn't be wrong in thinking that's a cliche either, in my opinion. But not inherently bad. Tropes are things that a lot of people tend to seek out in a book. It's a certain flavor of a particular genre that they have a taste for. I have a bunch of tropes that have been used just completely to death. They've been done, but I still love them. And the first one is the chosen one trope. While I could do away completely with the prophecy part of that, I think the prophecy part is a bit of a cliche. There is a definite appeal to chosen one stories. There's a reason it's popular, and my theory is that it's because we get to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who has a real destiny. They have a real purpose. There shouldn't be any shame in wanting to imagine ourselves in the place of someone who is just a bit more special than everyone else. I mean, if you say that about yourself, sure, you sound like a dick, but as if we haven't all dreamed about waking up one day and having certain magical powers. And I doubt when we've dreamed about that, we've imagined that everyone in the world woke up that day with the same magical powers. The prestige and the respect and the adoration parts of that, it's cool. But for me personally, I think the reason the chosen one trope is so attractive to me is because it just plays with the idea that there is a greater purpose. Makes me feel a bit better about the existential dread. Obviously, it has to be done well. It has to be done creatively. You can't just use the same cut and paste formula as every other chosen one story in the world because then it's just boring, obviously. And yeah, I would agree that it can be equally enjoyable, in a lot of cases more enjoyable, to have a more relatable hero. For example, a normal person who tends to not have anything particularly special about them that rises to the occasion. But I think that's enjoyable for a whole different reason. The chosen one trope is attractive because we get to imagine that there's a greater purpose and you're more special than everyone else, while the normal protagonist trope is a bit more of a realistic approach. I think the idea there is to make us a bit more okay with the fact that we are normal. And maybe if you want to get philosophical about it, you could say that it's to try and say that everyone has the potential to be a hero if only they would have the courage. All I'm saying is I'm not turned off by the idea of the protagonist having some dormant ability or responsibility that makes them extraordinarily unique. I like that. And of course it can be a burden, but don't make being burdened the entire personality of the protagonist. That's not fun to read. It's really not enjoyable to just read about some character being a whiny bitch. One of my all-time favorite tropes, and perhaps my second most favorite trope, is the villain redemption arc. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Examples of this could be Draco Malfoy, assuming they didn't cut the scene where he throws Harry his wand. Loki from the MCU, Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones. For a second, let's just take a real look at that. Yeah, the writing in the last season wasn't the best, but come on, they made us like a guy who, first of all, fucked his own sister and pushed a child out of a tower. They made us like him, and then they took a massive shit on his entire character arc. Crowley from Supernatural is another one. Another thing I really love, and this is probably the same trope, just a different side to the coin, is the villain who has a soft spot for the hero. Like, their villainous plot isn't just directly opposing the protagonist, they have an evil plan. The protagonist just happens to be opposed to that. Some examples of this could be Magneto and Charles Xavier. I remember it was like a fucking knife in the heart in the movies when Charles dies, right? These are like the older films, by the way, so it's not a spoiler or anything. Charles dies, and then Magneto is talking to, I think it's Pyro, and Pyro says, damn, that's a shame. I wish I could have killed him. Magneto just like flicks the cape, and he's like, the fuck you say to me, you little bitch? Charles would have popped your head like a little peanut, you douche. Or what about Negan when he... Spoiler alert for The Walking Dead, if you haven't watched it already though, that's your own damn fault. Negan when he finds out that Carl died and he gets all choked up about that. Those scenes in all types of media, like books, television and media included, just perfection. I tend to tear up during sad films, I'm man enough to admit it, and those ones always get me. Don't cry, lad. Tears are the devil's lubricant. Another trope I'm particularly fond of is the dystopian faction stories. You know the ones I'm talking about, Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner, etc. I really like them, although they're like extremely predictable, I tend to have a lot of fun with them. Although I want to be clear here, I am completely over and I don't want to see any more the teenagers versus a totalitarian government anymore, and I don't think that's necessary for a dystopian faction story. You could do a dystopian story where the class struggles are the conflict of the story, and where across the span of a whole series they have to build relationships and build an army per se to go against this other side. I really like that. I really like seeing that come together. I don't think the antagonist has to be like one dictator though. I mean, look at Hunger Games and Divergent. I love both of those series, I really do, and I'm not accusing anyone of plagiarism here, but the whole dictator villain situation there was almost exactly identical. You have someone in power or someone who is taking power, who is doing the wrong thing. Then you have someone who says they want to take them down because it's the right thing to do and that they think they would make a better leader, who basically ends up becoming just as bad, or has the potential to be just as bad. I don't want to see that done anymore. No more. Stop. How do you top Cornelius Snow anyway? You can't. Have you ever seen a face more punchable? That's not a stab at Donald Sutherland, by the way. You're magnificent, sir. Slay, sweetie. Slay. Haunted asylums and hospitals and horror are the bee's sexy knees, my guy. I love it when a horror story prioritizes a scary setting just as much as a scary monster. Always hits the right spot. Always. And I would say is integral to creating the atmosphere. While I'm on the topic of horror though, I know I said this would be about positivity. But I do want to mention that I am fucking done with creepy kids in horror. No more. I'm so bored of that. I'm so bored. Some of the biggest chills I've had in a horror book is when they enter a scary place, building, etc., whatever, and they realize that the exit is no longer an exit. They can't get out. That is what always just sucks me right in. A really recent example of this could be In the Tall Grass, the short story written by Joe Hill and Stephen King. There's also Grave Encounters, 1408, another Stephen King adaptation. I just love it. I'm a really claustrophobic guy, but I love having that claustrophobic feeling in horror stories. That's probably why it creeps me out so much. Another thing that creeps me out in horror that I really like is cults and the occult. Finding out that all this scary shit happening through the story has been because of some group or organization pulling the strings. And it's weird because more often than not, when they expose themselves, they literally expose themselves. They're all nude, which I mean is kind of clever. It leaves you unsettled, sure. And I guess there's nothing scarier than old man butt. You like it? Confess! But my favorite trope, okay, you ready for this? My favorite trope, the one I can't get enough of, is the brooding detective. Yes. The hard-boiled, brooding, hard-done-by detective who doesn't play by the rules. I love it. I'm trash for it. I stan. I'm here for it. Hashtag goals. I'm not even entirely sure why I like it because I'm aware that it's been incredibly overdone, and that's a problem when it's for such a specific thing. We're talking about a specific character type here. I should be bored of it, but I don't know. I'm just not. I think it's also to blame for me taking up smoking in high school. My lungs, thank you, mate. If I had to trace it back, I think it might have a lot to do with my early comic book fascination, specifically with the character Constantine. Constantine is, without a doubt, one of the coolest comic book characters of all time. I think he's actually my second favorite behind The Flash, just in front of Gambit. I think another reason I really love this trope is because you start off with this detective who's extremely closed off to everyone because of, let's say, a tragedy. His partner or child died and he's just closed off to everyone. But there's always a moment in those books where their walls come down and they end up showing affection, or better yet, they get really protective of another child or another love interest. That feeling is better than smoking. It might not be better than smoking. I don't know. I haven't smoked in a long time. Do I miss cigarettes? No. But that feeling is fantastic, even if 9 times out of 10 it makes me cry. Oh, devil's lubricant! Although, on the topic of detectives, I'm definitely not here for the partner was secretly corrupt the whole time cliche. That one's a bit more boring. Another couple of tropes I really enjoy, but I won't go in depth for, are the artificial intelligence that becomes sentient in science fiction, and the old mentor, like in fantasy and quests or adventure, or I don't know, basically anything where the hero kicks ass. I really like those. I hope they don't die out. I think the best way for me to close this video would be, if I can be so humble, for me to provide you with a bit of advice when it comes to tropes. It's advice time, guys. Advice time with... Oh shit, that was a real sneeze. So the great thing about tropes is that there is a tool in the writer's tool belt for tropes called a subverted trope. It's an extremely valuable tool. If you know that your story is going to include a trope, that's fine. What a lot of skilled writers do when they know that their story is going to have a trope, for example, a brooding detective, is they'll lean into it. You get the reader in a situation where they feel like they've got it all figured out. They know exactly what's going to happen and how. And just when they have that realization, let's say about midway through the book, wham! You hit them with a twist. You spin the story in a bit of a different direction. Subverted trope. Anyway, that's it. That's pretty much all my favorite book tropes. And hey, let me know what your favorite tropes are in the comments below. But keep it positive, subscribe to my channel, and you'll have the power to eat cheese with your ears. Catch ya.
She's got class and style, street knowledge by the pound, yeah. Baby never act wild, very low key on the profile. Catching feelings is